You wake in the deepest part of the night, long before the sun has even considered touching the jagged peaks of the Alborz Mountains, and for a moment, the only thing you are aware of is the weight of the wool blanket against your chest and the absolute, velvet silence of the stone cell. The air is thin here, high above the world, and it carries a sharp, crystalline chill that settles in the back of your throat with every slow, deliberate breath you take. You lie still, feeling the coarse texture of the stropped mattress beneath you, listening to the rhythm of your own heart, which seems to echo the ancient heartbeat of the fortress itself. This place, carved directly into the living rock of the mountain, does not feel like a building. It feels like a dormant giant, and you are a small, quiet part of its inner life. You push the blanket aside, the rustle of the fabric sounding like a landslide in the utter quiet, and your feet find the floor, which is paved with smooth, dark slate that has been worn into gentle hollows by the feet of thousands of initiates who came before you. The cold of the stone travels up through your soles, a grounding sensation that pulls you fully into the present moment. You reach for your tunic, the fabric heavy and dyed a deep, muted indigo that looks almost black in the gloom, and as you pull it over your head, you feel the familiar scent of cedarwood and dried hyssop that clings to the fibers. There is no lamp in your cell, for you have learned to move by the memory of the space, feeling the grain of the walls and the specific tilt of the floor. You step out into the corridor, where the air is even colder and moves in slow, ghostly currents that smell of old dust and damp earth. Every few dozen paces, a small oil lamp sits in a recessed niche, its flame a tiny, trembling point of amber light that casts long rhythmic shadows against the vaulted ceiling. You walk with your weight on the balls of your feet, a habit so deeply ingrained that you no longer know how to walk any other way, and the only sound is the faint rhythmic clink of the keys carried by a distant sentry, a sound so soft it might be mistaken for the dripping of meltwater in a faraway cavern. The fortress is waking up, but it wakes up in sighs and whispers, never in shouts. You pass other initiates, shadows among shadows, their faces obscured by the dim light. Yet you feel a profound sense of shared purpose in the way they move, shoulders relaxed, gazes lowered, each one a vessel of quiet discipline. You reach the great hall of records, a space so vast that the ceiling is lost in darkness, and you pause for a moment to feel the sheer scale of the silence here. The walls are lined with thousands of scrolls, their parchment dry and smelling of ancient sunlight, and the air is heavy with the weight of accumulated knowledge. You continue your descent down a spiral staircase where the steps are so narrow and steep that you must focus entirely on the placement of your toes, a moving meditation that clears your mind of all stray thoughts. By the time you reach the lower training court, the sky outside the narrow high-slit windows has turned a bruised, deep purple, the color of a plum. The court is an open quadrangle, surrounded by high walls of grey granite that seem to hold the mountains cold within them. You take your place among the other low-ranking initiates, standing in a grid of perfect symmetry. No one speaks. No one greets another. The discipline is total, a shared agreement to exist without the intrusion of words. The master of the morning session stands at the front, a figure so still he might be a statue carved from the same granite as the walls. He raises a hand, a movement as slow as the growth of lichen, and the practice begins. It is not a practice of striking, but a practice of balance. You are instructed to stand on one leg upon a narrow wooden beam, only 3 inches wide, and to remain there as the light slowly changes. You feel the micro-adjustments in your ankle, the way your muscles ripple and settle to maintain center. You focus your gaze on a single crack in the wall opposite you, and as the minutes stretch into an hour, the world begins to dissolve. There is only the crack in the stone, the cool air on your skin, and the steady, unwavering line of your spine. Your breath becomes a slow, rhythmic tide, pulling in the morning chill and releasing a faint mist into the air. You watch the sun finally crest the distant eastern ridges, a sliver of molten gold that spills over the rim of the world and ignites the snow-capped peaks in a fire of rose and orange. The light creeps down the walls of the court, inch by agonizingly slow inch, until it reaches your feet, warming the dark fabric of your trousers. You do not move. You are a part of the mountain, as unmoving as the roots of the cedar trees that cling to the cliffs outside. When the signal is finally given to descend from the beams, it is a soft chime of a bronze bell, a sound that vibrates in the marrow of your bones. You move to the next phase of the morning, which is the practice of observation. You are led to a balcony that overlooks the sheer drop of the northern face, where the valley floor is hidden beneath a sea of white clouds. Your task is to watch the movement of the mist and the flight of the eagles. You sit cross-legged on the stone, your hands resting palms up on your knees, and you learn to see without looking. You notice the way the wind carves paths through the fog, the way a single bird can hang motionless on an updraft for what feels like an eternity. This is the core of your education, the understanding that power is not found in exertion, but in the perfect alignment with the world as it is. Your mind becomes as clear and still as a high mountain pool. Around midday, the sun is directly overhead, a pale, heatless disk in a sky of intense, dark blue. You are led to the refectory, a long, low-ceilinged room where the smell of wood smoke and baking bread hangs thick and welcoming. You sit at a long table of polished oak, the surface scarred by centuries of use. A bowl is placed before you, containing a simple meal, a handful of dried dates, a piece of flatbread still warm from the oven, and a small portion of lentils seasoned with cumin and salt. You eat in total silence, the only sound the scraping of wooden spoons against ceramic bowls and the distant, muffled roar of a waterfall somewhere deep in the mountain's clefts. You chew slowly, savoring the sweetness of the dates and the earthy richness of the lentils, aware that every calorie is a gift from the order, a fuel for the long journey of your transformation. The water you drink is drawn from a deep well, so cold it makes your teeth ache, tasting of minerals and the deep, dark places of the earth. After the meal, there is a period of manual labor, a grounding task to remind you of your connection to the physical world. Today, your task is the sharpening of training blades in the armory. The armory is a subterranean chamber, lit by glowing braziers that cast a dancing, orange light over racks of steel and iron. You take your seat at a low bench, a heavy whetstone in front of you. You pick up a practice dagger, its edge dull from the day's exercises, and you begin the rhythmic motion of sharpening. The sound is a steady, soothing she, a metallic whisper that fills the room. You apply a drop of oil to the stone, watching it spread into a shimmering film. You focus on the angle of the blade, the pressure of your thumb, the way the steel begins to catch the light as the edge is restored. There is a profound peace in this repetitive work, a sense of order being imposed on the world, one stroke at a time. The air in the armory is warm and smells of oil, charcoal, and the sharp ozone scent of grinding metal. You work for hours, lost in the rhythm, your hands moving with a grace that you didn't know you possessed until you came to this place. As the afternoon wanes, The light in the high windows of the fortress begins to turn to a deep, honeyed amber. You are summoned to the library, not to read, but to practice the art of calligraphy. You sit at a small desk, the parchment before you smooth and pale. You dip a reed pen into a pot of thick, soot-black ink and begin to copy a series of geometric patterns. The goal is not speed, but the absolute control of the hand. You must breathe with every stroke, the pen moving as an extension of your spirit. You feel the slight resistance of the parchment, the way the ink flows into the fibers, the precise moment when a line becomes a curve. The room is silent, save for the scratching of pens and the occasional rustle of a page. The shadows lengthen, stretching across the floor like the fingers of a giant, and the fortress begins to settle into its evening mood. You feel a sense of profound anonymity, a shedding of your former self. Here, you have no name, no past, only the quiet excellence of your actions and the depth of your obedience. It is a liberating feeling to be a ghost in a mountain of ghosts, all moving toward a purpose that is felt rather than understood. When the sun finally dips below the horizon, the sky turns a brilliant, fleeting violet, and the first stars begin to prick through the darkness like diamonds on a bed of velvet. You walk out onto the battlements for the evening watch. The wind now is steady, cold pressure against your chest. The valley below is a void of darkness, with only the occasional flicker of a campfire from a distant village to suggest that there is a world beyond these walls. You wrap your cloak tightly around you, the heavy wool providing a cocoon of warmth. You stand perfectly still, your back against a crenellation, watching the constellations rotate slowly around the North Star. The air is so clear that the stars do not seem to twinkle. They glow with a steady, unblinking light. You are pulled from the edge of sleep by a sound that is less a noise and more a subtle change in the air's vibration. A soft, rhythmic drumming against the heavy wood of your door that signals the arrival of the night watcher. You do not startle, for the discipline of the previous day has already begun to rewire your instincts, replacing the frantic jerk of the uninitiated with a slow, deliberate gathering of awareness that starts in your core and radiates outward to your fingertips. You sit up, the wool blanket falling away with a dry, hushed rustle that seems to fill the small room, and you see a figure standing in the doorway, silhouetted against the dim, flickering amber of the corridor's oil lamps. It is one of the elders, a man whose name you do not know, but whose presence you have felt in the library and the courtyard like a cooling breeze. A shadow among shadows who moves with a fluidity that suggests his bones are made of the same mountain water that flows through the hidden conduits. Deep beneath the floor, he does not speak, for in this place words are treated as precious resources to be used only when the silence cannot convey the truth. And he simply tilts his head toward the darkness of the hall and beckons with a single, slow gesture of a gloved hand that looks like the wing of a moth in the low light. You rise and dress in the dark, your fingers moving with practiced efficiency through the layers of your indigo tunic and the thick, protective leggings, finally cinching a wide leather belt that feels like a grounding weight around your waist, a reminder of your center. As you step into the corridor, the silence of the fortress feels different than it did during the waking hours. It is thicker, more layered, filled with the presence of hundreds of souls breathing in unison. A collective meditation that gives the stone walls a sense of living warmth, as if the mountain itself were inhaling the night. You follow the elder, your footsteps perfectly synchronized with his, creating a single ghostly rhythm that echoes softly off the vaulted ceilings and the smooth, damp surfaces of the masonry. You pass other elders and high-ranking members moving through the veins of the fortress, their faces obscured by hoods. Their movements so efficient they seem to glide over the uneven slate floors without the slightest friction. You pass doors that are closed tight, carved from ancient cedar that has turned black with age. But from behind them, you catch the faintest snatches of hushed conversation, voices like the dry rubbing of parchment, discussing matters of philosophy, celestial alignments, or the intricate logistics of the Order's vast, invisible network that stretches across the deserts and the seas. These are not the voices of men of violence, but of scholars and architects of a silent history, and the weight of their collective will presses down on you with a gravity that is both humbling and strangely comforting. A psychological tether that keeps you from drifting away into the void of your own thoughts. You realize that to obey is to be part of a grand, celestial machine, a cog in a clockwork that spans generations, and the individual ego begins to feel like a heavy, useless garment that you are slowly learning to shed in favor of this profound, shared anonymity. You descend further than you have ever gone before, down through the roots of the fortress where the air turns cold and smells of wet earth and ancient iron, passing through heavy, iron-bound doors that groan on their hinges with a sound like a low, metallic sigh that vibrates in your teeth. Finally, you reach a small, inconspicuous opening hidden behind a natural fold in the rock face, a postern gate where the air suddenly changes, losing the dry, dusty scent of the interior and taking on a sharp, wild edge that smells of frost, distant woods, and the bitter sap of juniper trees. 2 sentries stand here, as motionless as the stalactites in the deeper caverns, their eyes reflecting the pale light of the waning moon like polished obsidian. The elder pauses, placing a hand on your shoulder, rare moment of physical contact that feels like a profound transmission of trust and responsibility, and points toward the narrow, winding trail that clings to the side of the precipice like a thread of silver. This is your task, not to act, not to strike, but simply to see, to learn the art of the witness. You are to be the eyes of the mountain, a silent observer of the world that sleeps below, learning to bridge the gap between the monastic isolation of the fortress and the messy, vibrant reality of the valley. You step out onto the ledge, and for a moment, the sheer scale of the night sky threatens to overwhelm you. The stars so bright and so numerous that they seem to exert a physical pressure. A canopy of white fire that dwarfs the mountain and everything upon it. The air is bitingly cold, a crystalline force that makes your lungs feel as though they are being lined with silver, and the wind moans through the jagged crags with a voice that sounds like a forgotten language whispered by the earth itself. You begin the descent, your body leaning instinctively into the slope, your feet finding purchase on the loose shale and the weathered limestone with a confidence born of the morning's grueling balance drills. Every step is a calculated risk, a conversation between your weight and the gravity of the earth. And you listen to the way the stones shift beneath you, a dry, chattering sound that seems loud in the immense quiet. To your left, the rock face rises up like a frozen wave, its surface bleached white by the moonlight, looking more like bone or polished marble than common stone. To your right, the world drops away into a velvet void, a darkness so absolute that it feels like the edge of the universe. You move through thickets of stunted, wind-warped trees that claw at your cloak with skeletal fingers, their needles releasing a sharp, resinous perfume that cuts through the chill. You are aware of life moving in the periphery, the soft, heavy beat of an owl's wings as it hunts in the canyons, The scuttle of a mountain fox through the dry scrub, the distant, mournful howl of a wolf that echoes through the serrated peaks like a ghost of the wind. These sounds do not alarm you. They are the natural inhabitants of this high kingdom, and you are merely a guest in their domain, a shadow among shadows. Fear flickers in your chest, a small, cold flame, but it is tempered by an intense, burning curiosity, a desire to know what lies at the bottom of the world you have abandoned for this life of stone and silence. Your training has taught you that fear is simply a form of heightened awareness, a tool to be used rather than a master to be served, and you focus on the rhythm of your breath, making it slow and steady, matching the pace of your heart to the slow, ancient pulse of the mountain. The path levels out slightly as you reach a spur of rock that juts out over the lower slopes, a natural observation post that has likely been used by the Order for centuries, its surface worn smooth by the bodies of countless initiates who stood here before you. You crawl forward on your stomach, the cold stone pressing against your chest and the scent of damp moss filling your nostrils, until you reach the very edge of the ridge. Below you, the world finally reveals itself in all its quiet, sleeping majesty. The valley floor is a tapestry of shadows and soft, grey-blue light, and nestled in its center is a town, a cluster of low buildings that look like pebbles scattered along the silver thread of a river that glints like a snake in the moonlight. Most of the town is dark, surrendered to the deep peace of the night, but here and there a single, flickering amber light remains in a window, a sign of someone awake, someone tending a fire, someone living a life that is entirely alien to the one you lead inside the stone heart of the fortress. You watch the way the moonlight reflects off the thatched roofs and the stone walls, the way the smoke from the dying hearth fires curls lazily into the still air, and you feel a strange, profound disconnection, as if you are looking at a world through a sheet of thick glass. This is the world you were sworn to protect or to prune, a garden of human lives that exists in a different dimension of time, and the psychological weight of your obedience feels heavier here, under the open sky, than it ever did in the cramped stone cells. You realize with a start that your life is no longer your own, that you have become an instrument of a will much greater than your own, a silent guardian of a balance you are only beginning to comprehend. The town below seems so fragile, so vulnerable in its sleep, and the responsibility of your role settles into your bones with a cold, enduring weight that makes your limbs feel as heavy as the mountain itself. You remain there for hours, the frost beginning to form on the edges of your cloak in a fine, silver rim that catches the starlight, but you do not move, you do not shiver. You simply exist as a part of the landscape, a stone among stones, watching the slow rotation of the heavens and the quiet, rhythmic life of the world below. You are a ghost observing a dream, a silent presence on the threshold of a reality that you can see but no longer touch, and the secrets of why you are here and what is expected of you remain as distant as the stars overhead, flickering in the cold, dark air as the night continues its slow, majestic progress toward a dawn that is still many hours away. The silver light of the waning moon begins to dissolve into a pale, translucent grey as you pull yourself away from the ridge, the frost on your cloak crackling softly like the breaking of 1,000 tiny glass needles. You move with a slow, deliberate grace, your joints warming as you begin the final descent toward the valley floor, leaving behind the vertical world of the fortress for the horizontal world of men. The air here is different. As you lose altitude, the sharp, sterile bite of the mountain peaks is replaced by a thicker, heavier atmosphere that that carries the scent of damp earth, rotting leaves, and the distant, sweet tang of wood smoke that clings to the low places of the earth. You reach a small, natural alcove hidden behind a screen of gnarled, ancient olives, where a bundle has been stashed for your arrival, tucked into a crevice where the stone is dry and sheltered. With movements that are slow and rhythmic, you shed your indigo tunic, the color of the hidden orderand, fold it with the same reverence you would show a holy relic, placing it deep within the shadows of the rock. You pull on the garments of a common traveler, a rough-spun tunic of undyed wool that smells of sheep and rain, and a heavy travel-stained mantle that has been rubbed with the dust of the lower roads to mask its origin. You feel the change in the texture of the fabric against your skin. Where the fortress silks were cool and frictionless, this wool is coarse and irritating, a physical reminder of the friction and messiness of the world you are about to enter. You adjust the hood so that it shadows your face, not in the way of a hunter, but in the way of a man who is tired from a long journey, someone who wishes only to pass unnoticed and unremembered. You walk toward the town, your pace slowing to match the natural rhythm of a person who has no secret purpose, letting your shoulders slump slightly, shedding the rigid, upright posture of the initiate. The town walls are not the imposing, seamless granite of your home, but are built of sun-dried brick and timber, weathered by the seasons and patched with mud, looking like a living creature that has grown out of the silt of the river. As you approach the gate, which groans open on massive, iron-strapped timber hinges, the sound is like a deep, low bellow that echoes through the narrow streets, signaling the official end of the night. You step inside, and the sensory contrast hits you like a soft wave. Here, the silence of the mountain is replaced by the waking sighs of humanity. You walk down a narrow alley where the stones are damp with morning dew, and you hear the first rhythmic thump-thump of a baker's hands against a wooden kneading trough. You pause in the shadows of a stone archway, watching through a low, soot-stained window as the baker, a man with arms as thick as tree roots and skin dusted with white flour, leans into his work. The air around his shop is warm and heavy with the scent of fermenting yeast and the dry, toasted smell of the grain. He moves with a different kind of discipline than you have been taught, a repetitive, ancestral labor that provides for the bellies of the town. His movements unhurried and grounded in the physical reality of sustenance. You watch as he stokes the fire in his great stone oven, the flint striking the steel with a tiny, sharp clink that catches the dry tinder, which begins to glow like a dying star before blooming into a soft, orange flame that licks the sides of the hearth. The glow illuminates the room, casting long, dancing shadows of hanging baskets and wooden peels against the walls. And you realize that while the fortress seeks to transcend the physical, this world is built entirely upon it. You move further into the town, your feet making no more sound than a drifting leaf, practicing the art of being invisible in plain sight. This is the true test of your training, not to hide in the dark, but to exist in the light without drawing a single eye. You pass a merchant setting up his stall in the small square, his movements slow and stiff with the morning cold. He unpacks crates of dried apricots and sacks of salt, the wood of the crates groaning as he pries them open, the sound sharp in the quiet air. You observe the way he arranges his wares, the pride in his weathered hands as he smooths the burlap, the way he looks up at the sky to judge the coming weather. To him, the mountain is just a backdrop, a jagged wall of stone that limits the horizon, while to you it is the center of the universe. You walk past a stable where a donkey stirs in the straw, its breath coming in long, misty plumes that catch the first golden rays of the sun as they spill over the town walls. The animal's large, dark eyes watch you with a calm, unblinking intelligence, and you hear the soft, rhythmic grinding of its teeth as it chews on a bit of dry hay. The sounds of the town are beginning to layer upon one another, the splash of water from a bucket being drawn from a well, the distant call of a rooster that sounds thin and fragile against the vastness of the valley, the soft, muffled voices of women talking as they open their shutters, the wooden wood clack of the latches. You feel a strange hollow sensation in your chest, a realization of the fragility of these lives, how easily they flow in their predestined channels, unaware of the shadows that watch them from the heights. Your training has taught you that to take a life, you must first understand the weight of it, the intricate web of habits and rhythms that make a human being a part of the world. You are learning the texture of their existence, the way the dust settles in the creases of their clothes, the way they lean against a wall to rest, the way they greet the sun with a quiet, half-whispered prayer. You stand by a fountain in the center of the square, the water trickling from a stone lion's mouth with a constant, soothing gurgle that masks the sound of your own breathing. You watch as a young boy, no older than 10, runs across the square with a bundle of firewood, his laughter a bright silver sound that seems to vibrate in the air, long after he has disappeared round a corner. It is a sound you have not heard in a long time, a sound that has no place in the fortress, and it fills you with a quiet, contemplative melancholy. You realize that you are a ghost in their midst, a creature of the heights who has descended to walk among the living, and the restraint required to remain a mere observer is a form of power more profound than any weapon. You do not intervene, you do not help, you do not hinder. You simply record the world in your mind, every smell of roasting coffee, every sound of a sweeping broom, every play of light on the mud-slicked cobbles. The sun is now fully above the horizon, turning the grey world into a riot of muted colours, the red of the clay tiles, the pale yellow of the straw, the deep earthy brown of the timber beams. The town is fully awake now, the hum of activity growing into a steady, low-frequency pulse that feels like the heartbeat of the valley. You see the first of the town's elders emerging into the light, their movements slow and dignified, their long robes brushing against the stones with a soft, shushing sound. You'll realize it is time to leave, for the light is becoming too honest, and your presence, however well disguised, will eventually begin to register in the peripheral vision of the world. You turn away from the fountain, moving with the same unhurried, weary gait of the traveller, and make your way back toward the gate through which you entered. You pass the baker again, and now the air is thick with the divine. Warm smell of freshly baked bread, a scent so comforting and primal that it makes your stomach ache with a sudden, sharp hunger. You see him pulling the first loaves from the oven, their crusts golden and dusted with ash, steam rising from them in thin, swirling ribbons. You keep walking, resisting the urge to stop, resisting the urge to be a part of this warmth. You pass through the gate, and as the heavy timber doors begin to close behind you for the day's traffic, you feel the sudden drop in temperature as the shadow of the mountain falls over you once more. You walk back toward the olive grove, the sounds of the town beginning to fade, replaced by the wind and the rustle of the dry grass. You reach the alcove and shed the commoner's wool, feeling the cool, familiar touch of your indigo tunic as you pull it back over your head. The transition back into your true self is like stepping into a cold stream. The messiness of the town, its warmth and its noise, begins to slough away, leaving only the hard, polished surface of your discipline. You begin the journey back up the mountain, the path steeper now, the stones more familiar to your feet. The town below is shrinking, becoming once again a collection of pebbles by a silver thread, a dream that you visited for a brief, flickering moment. You climb with a steady, rhythmic pace, your breath evening out, your heart rate settling into the slow, powerful thrum of the mountain. You are returning to the silence, to the stone, to the secret world that demands everything of you and gives nothing back but the truth of the void. The journey back will be long, and the sun will be high and hot before you reach the hidden gate. But you move with a quiet, unshakable purpose. The images of the baker, the merchant, and the boy etched into your memory like ink on parchment. You are the observer, the witness, the silent hand that waits in the heights. And as you climb further into the thin, cold air, the world of men becomes nothing more than a soft, distant murmur, a flicker of life in the immense, enduring shadow of the peaks. The transition from the world of light and dust back into the cool, limestone embrace of the fortress is a slow folding of the spirit, a return to the unchanging state of being that defines the order. As you cross the threshold of the postern gate, the elder who guided you to the ridge is there, waiting in the half-light of the mountain's shadow, his face still a mystery of creases and stillness. He leads you not back to your cell, but upward, through corridors you have never traversed, where the walls are lined with mosaics of blue and gold that seem to shimmer with a light of their own, depicting the celestial spheres and the slow, inexorable movement of the planets. You enter a small, enclosed courtyard tucked away in the upper reaches of the fortress, a space so quiet that you can hear the soft, rhythmic scratching of a single quill from a window high above. In the center of the courtyard stands a hidden garden, a miracle of green and damp earth carved out of the very summit, where water trickles through narrow stone channels into a shallow pool filled with pale, translucent fish. Here you are introduced to your mentor, a man whose presence is like the scent of old rain on stone, faint, pervasive, and ancient. He does not ask what you saw in the town, for he already knows. Instead, he gestures for you to sit on a low stone bench and begins a lesson that has no beginning and no end. You spend the following weeks in this garden and the quiet chambers adjoining it, learning the art of the many-faced shadow. You sit for hours memorizing the layout of distant cities you have never seen, tracing the narrow veins of Baghdad, the sprawling gates of Damascus, and the salt-stained docks of Acre with your finger across maps drawn on vellum so thin it feels like dried skin. You learn to speak in the cadences of different tongues, your mentor correcting the slight curve of your tongue or the weight of a vowel until your voice becomes a blank slate, capable of holding any identity without betraying your origin. You practice the walk of a crippled beggar, feeling the shift in your center of gravity as you drag a leg, and then the arrogant, wide-paced stride of a Frankish knight, the fabric of your training robes standing in for the weight of phantom armor. You learn that invisibility is not about being unseen, but about being unremembered. It is the art of fitting so perfectly into the expectations of others that their eyes slide over you like water over a smooth stone. Your mentor teaches you to observe the minute gestures of social rank, the way a servant lowers his gaze just 3 inches, the specific tilt of a merchant's head when he is lying about the price of silk, the nervous habit of a scribe tapping his pen against his teeth. These are the threads from which you will eventually weave a second skin. In the hidden garden, among the scent of crushed mint and damp moss, you are taught the virtue of the seed, which waits in the dark of the earth for the exact moment of its awakening. Your mentor speaks of time not as a sequence of minutes to be filled, but as a vast, slow-moving river that can erode even the hardest mountain if one has the patience to wait. Time, he whispers in a voice that sounds like the rustle of dry leaves, is the greatest weapon in the Order's arsenal, more lethal than any blade and more certain than any poison. You spend hours in a state of absolute stillness, watching the shadow of a sundial move across the courtyard floor, learning to exist in the spaces between moments where the rest of the world is too hurried to look. You realize that the urgency you felt when you first arrived at the fortress, the desire to prove yourself, to be given a task, to feel the thrill of a mission, was merely a remnant of your former self, a flicker of ego that must be extinguished. The training is a process of sanding down the sharp edges of your soul until you are as smooth and anonymous as the pebbles in the garden stream. One afternoon, as the sun hangs low and red against the jagged horizon, casting long, violet shadows across the mosaics, you watch your mentor pruning a miniature cedar tree with a tiny silver blade. He moves with a focus that is terrifyingly complete, his entire universe narrowed down to the placement of a single cut. In that moment, the realization settles into your bones with a cold, quiet clarity. You are not being trained for a day, or a month, or even a year. You are being shaped for a single moment that may not come for a decade, or perhaps longer. You see the other initiates, some of whom have white hair and eyes as clear as mountain ice, still practicing their forms, still studying the stars, still waiting for the call that may never come. You understand now that your life is no longer a journey toward a destination, but a state of perpetual readiness, a long, slow inhalation that may not be released for half a lifetime. The fortress is not a school, but a crucible where time is the heat that transforms the iron of your will into the steel of the Order. You feel a profound sense of peace in this realization, a shedding of the burden of the future. The night begins to settle over the high garden, the stars appearing one by one in the deep indigo vault of the sky, and you sit in the darkness, listening to the water trickle and the wind sigh through the ancient cedars. You are a part of the mountain's patience, a shadow waiting for its purpose to be revealed in the fullness of time. And as the cold air of the summit begins to descend, you realize that years may pass in this quiet rhythm of study and stillness before you are ever asked to leave these walls again. And you find that you are perfectly content to wait, a silent soul drifting in the long, beautiful dark of the Order's eternal memory. The silence of the stone grows deeper with each passing season, and you find that the mountain is not just your home, but your teacher, showing you how to stand unmoved while the winds of the world howl and rage far below. You learn to listen to the stone itself, to the way it expands in the heat of the day and contracts in the freeze of the night. A slow and rhythmic breathing that you eventually adopt as your own. Your mentor no longer needs to speak. A simple glance, a subtle shift in his posture, or the way he holds his tea bowl tells you everything you need to know about the state of your progress. You are becoming a vessel, emptying yourself of all personal desire until only the mission, whatever it may be, whenever it may come. This is the true essence of the hidden order, to be nothing so that you may eventually be anything, to wait in the shadow until the shadow itself becomes your armor. And so, the years begin to blur into a single, continuous stream of study, meditation, and quiet discipline. As you settle into the profound and peaceful realization that your journey has no end, only a series of ever-deepening layers of silence and service. The descent of winter upon the mountain is not an event of wind and fury, but a slow, suffocating increase in the density of the silence. A gradual thickening of the air until it feels like a physical weight against your chest. You stand at the high window of the western watchtower, watching the sky transform from a pale, translucent blue into a heavy, opaque sheet of bruised silver, as the first flakes of snow begin to drift through the rarefied atmosphere. These are not the soft, playful flakes of the lower valleys. They are sharp, crystalline needles that catch the light like powdered diamond, swirling in slow, hypnotic patterns that mirror the turning of the celestial spheres you have spent so many hours studying. The snowfall is relentless and hushed, a white tide that slowly erases the jagged edges of the peaks and fills the deep crevices of the rock until the mountain fortress is no longer a structure built upon the earth, but a ghost carved out of the ice itself. You feel the cold creeping into the marrow of your bones, a steady, unyielding pressure that you have learned to meet not with resistance, but with a quiet, inner surrender. In the fortress, the rhythms of life contract as the snow rises against the heavy, iron-bound gates, sealing the order away from the world of men for a season that feels as long as an age. The corridors are now lit by fewer lamps, their amber flames guttering in the drafts that sneak through invisible fissures in the stone, casting long, rhythmic shadows that dance across the vaulted ceilings like the spirits of the ancestors. The air smells of dry wood smoke and the cold, metallic scent of frost, a scent that seems to sharpen your thoughts and clarify your intent. Your daily routine becomes even more focused, more internal, as the physical world outside dissolves into a white void. The meals, which were already sparse, are now matters of pure survival. Stripped of all pleasure and reduced to the essential fuel required to keep the flame of life burning on a low, steady simmer. You sit in the refectory, a space that feels cavernous and hollow in the winter gloom, and you eat your portion of dried pulse and hard, salted meat in a silence so profound that the sound of your own chewing seems like a violation of the peace. No one speaks. No one looks up. There is a communal understanding that energy must be preserved, that every breath is a gift from the mountain, and that to waste words is to waste the very essence of your being. You find yourself becoming more aware of the internal architecture of your body, the way your lungs expand and contract, the rhythmic thrum of your heart, the slow, steady flow of blood through your veins. You are no longer a person with a history and a name. You are a biological machine, a vessel of awareness that is being refined in the crucible of the cold. The physical hardships are constant and unrelenting. Your sleeping cell is a box of frozen stone where the moisture from your breath turns to a fine layer of rime on the walls by morning. You wrap yourself in your heavy wool blankets, but the cold is a persistent thief, stealing the warmth from your skin until you feel as though you are becoming part of the slate floor. You do not complain, for there is no one to hear you, and the part of you that once desired warmth and soft beds is becoming a stranger to you. You remember, with a faint and growing sense of unreality, a life where you slept under silk and woke to the sound of birds in a garden. You remember the smell of jasmine and the warmth of a sun that actually heated the skin. But these memories are like old faded scrolls where the ink has begun to flake away, leaving only the ghost of a story. You try to recall the faces of your family, but they are becoming archetypes rather than people. Mother's smile is now just the idea of kindness. A brother's voice is just the memory of noise. You realize that the order is not just teaching you how to move and how to observe. It is systematically dismantling the structure of your former self, clearing the ground so that something new and terrifyingly pure can be built in its place. The loss of your identity is a slow, painless erosion, like the way the wind rounds the edges of the mountain crags. You are being sanded down by the silence and the cold until you are as smooth and anonymous as a pebble in a stream. The senior mentor who guides your winter studies is a man who seems to have transcended the need for heat altogether. You meet him in a chamber deep within the heart of the mountain, where the walls are thick enough to muffle even the most violent winter storms. The room is lit by a single, steady brazier that gives off more light than warmth, and the air is thick with the scent of old parchment and the sharp, medicinal temps of herbs being dried for the Order's secret pharmacopoeia. Here you sit for hours on the hard floor, practicing the art of the still mind. He tells you that an assassin's greatest weapon is not the dagger or the poison, but the ability to wait until the world forgets you are there. You learn to slow your heart rate through breath control, to enter a state of suspended animation where your body requires almost nothing and your mind remains as sharp as a razor. You study the languages of the north and the south, the dialects of the desert and the slang of the docks, until your tongue can mimic any sound the human throat can produce. You learn the secret signs of the Order, a specific way of holding a cup, a subtle arrangement of stones on a path, a pattern of breathing that identifies a brother in a crowded market. These are the threads of the invisible net the Order casts over the world, and you are becoming one of its knots. The winter deepens, and the snow outside rises until it reaches the lower arrow slits, plunging the ground floors of the fortress into a permanent, sepulchral twilight. The isolation is total. There is no news from the valley, no travelers at the gate, no connection to the passing of time other than the slow rotation of the stars that you glimpse through the high observatory roof. You spend your days in a state of moving meditation, cleaning the armory, organizing the library, or simply standing guard in the freezing corridors, your mind a blank slate, your body a coiled spring. The lack of personal belongings becomes a source of strength. You own nothing, and therefore nothing owns you. Your indigo tunic is your only skin, your training blade your only companion. You reflect on the nature of obedience, realizing that it is not a surrendering of the will, but a refinement of it. To obey the Order is to align yourself with the fundamental laws of the mountain constancy, patience, and the inevitability of the shadow. You are being prepared for a purpose that is so vast it cannot be explained, a mission that may take years to manifest. The mentor tells you stories of brothers who lived for decades as humble gardeners or silent scribes in foreign courts, never once drawing a blade until the one moment when their presence changed the course of history. You understand now that you are not being trained for a career, but for a destiny that requires the total sacrifice of the individual. As you walk back to your cell in the deepest part of the night, the silence of the fortress is so absolute that you can hear the creak of the mountain under the weight of the ice. The world is a white void, a tabula rasa upon which the Order will eventually write its will. You lie down on your straw mattress, the cold stone pressing against your back, and you feel a sense of profound, unshakable peace. The boy who came to this mountain is gone, replaced by a shadow that breathes and waits. You close your eyes, and the darkness is not a frightening thing, but a familiar cloak that protects you from the distractions of the world. The snow continues to fall outside, a thick, white curtain that hides the fortress from the eyes of God and man alike, and you sink into a dreamless sleep, secure in the knowledge that you are a part of something eternal, a silent heartbeat in the frozen chest of the world. The winter is your teacher, the cold is your master, and the silence is your home. And as the months stretch out in a long, unbroken ribbon of grey and white, you find that you have finally stopped waiting for the spring. You are the winter. You are the stone. You are the shadow that remains when all the lights have gone out. The training continues in the quiet, in the dark, and in the profound. Beautiful emptiness of a life that has been given over to a secret that will never be told. You are an initiate of the mountain, a ghost in training, and the snow will keep your secrets until the time comes for the world to learn what it means to be truly invisible. The silence is your armor, and the cold is your strength. And as you drift further into the depths of the night, you feel the mountain itself breathing with you, a slow, tectonic pulse that promises that everything in its own time will be revealed, and everything in its own time will be fulfilled. The night is long, the mountain is high, and your journey into the heart of the silence has only just begun. A path of stone and shadow that leads toward a future that is as certain and as hidden as the roots of the peaks beneath the snow. You sink into the stillness, a single grain of sand in the hourglass of the order, waiting for the turn that will start your time. The fortress remains, a dark tooth of rock in a sea of white, guarding its secrets and its sons with the fierce, cold love of the ancient earth, and you are finally, truly, at rest. The transition from the deep, velvet darkness of midwinter into the pale, frozen light of the late season is a journey measured not in days, but in the slow accumulation of ice against the heavy stone lintels of your cell. Outside, the world has long since ceased to exist in any form other than white and grey, a vast and swirling void where the sky and the earth have merged into a single, opaque curtain of falling snow. The fortress, carved into the very bones of the peak, has become a labyrinth of frost, its external walls disappearing beneath drifts that reach the height of the lower battlements, turning the imposing granite towers into soft, rounded mounds that resemble the sleeping forms of prehistoric giants. You wake each morning to a silence so absolute it feels as though the air itself has frozen solid, a heavy and protective weight that presses against the fortress doors, sealing you within a tomb of absolute peace. Your first breath of the day is a sharp, crystalline shock that clarifies your mind. A cold so pure it seems to scour the lungs of any lingering warmth. You move slowly, your joints stiff from the night's chill, feeling the familiar texture of the rough wool blankets as you push them aside to meet the day. The slate floor of your cell is now a surface of such intense cold that it feels almost like fire against the soles of your feet, a grounding sensation that demands total presence. You dress in layers of thick, indigo wool that has become stiff with the damp and the cold, the fabric making a low, rhythmic sound as it brushes against your skin, a sound that is the only companion to your breathing. There is no urgency in your movements, for time in the winter fortress has no meaning beyond the repetition of the breath and the maintenance of the spirit. You step out into the long, vaulted corridors where the oil lamps are spaced further apart to conserve the precious fuel, their flames reduced to tiny, shivering points of amber that struggle against the encroaching dark. The walls are covered in a fine, shimmering layer of rime that sparkles like stardust in the low light, reflecting the geometric patterns of the masonry back at you in a distorted, frozen mirror. You walk toward the inner courtyard for the morning drills, your weight shifting with a deliberate, cat-like caution, for the stone beneath your feet is often glazed with a thin, invisible skin of ice that has seeped through the fissures in the rock. When you reach the courtyard, you find it transformed into a cathedral of white, the open sky above a heavy ceiling of low-hanging clouds that seem to rest on the very tops of the towers. The air here is a living thing, a biting wind that whistles through the arrow slits and swells. The fresh snow into miniature cyclones that dance across the open space. You take your place among the other initiates, your figures appearing like dark ink blots against the blinding whiteness of the ground. The practice today is the art of silent movement across treacherous terrain, a drill that requires you to cross the courtyard without disturbing the surface of the drifted snow or making a single sound against the hidden ice beneath. You begin to move, lifting your foot with an agonizing slowness, your muscles trembling under the strain of holding a single-legged balance while the wind tugs at your cloak. You feel the cold numbing your toes, a creeping loss of sensation that you must ignore in favor of the deeper knowledge of your body's alignment. You place your foot down, feeling for the solid rock beneath the powder, distributing your weight so precisely that not a single crystal of snow is crushed. Your breath emerges in long, rhythmic plumes of fog that hang in the still air before being swept away by the wind. A visual representation of the life force you are working so hard to contain. The training is a study in endurance and the total mastery of the physical self over the elements. Your fingers, exposed for the sake of tactile sensitivity, turn a pale, ghostly white, the tips losing their feeling until you must rely on the memory of touch rather than the sensation itself. You practice the draw of your practice blade, a wooden dagger that feels like a shard of ice in your hand, moving it through the air in a slow, continuous arc that leaves a faint trail in the misty air. Every movement is a meditation on stillness, an exercise in being the mountain rather than moving upon it. The monotony of the drills is not a burden, but a comfort, a rhythmic certainty that anchors you in a world that has become featureless and vast. When the morning session concludes, you retreat back into the warmth of the inner chambers. Though warmth is a relative term in a place built of unyielding stone, you spend hours in the small, dim armory, a room that smells of charcoal, lanolin, and the sharp, sour scent of wet. Your task is the meticulous care of your gear, a routine that demands the same level of focus as the courtyard drills. You sit on a low stool, the light of a single tallow candle illuminating the steel of your blade as you run a cloth soaked in oil along its length. The sound is a rhythmic, soothing hiss, a metallic whisper that fills the small space and drowns out the distant moan of the wind. You look for the slightest nick, the smallest speck of rust, treating the weapon not as a tool of death, but as a mirror of your own soul. If the blade is clean and sharp, your mind is clean and sharp. If the edge is true, your purpose is true. After the weapons are tended, you turn to your clothing, using a bone needle and thick thread to repair the fraying hems of your tunic. The repetitive motion of the needle passing through the heavy fabric is hypnotic, a tactile ritual that connects you to the generations of initiates who sat in this same room, performing these same tasks while the winter raged outside. You find yourself reflecting on the nature of your identity, observing the way your past life continues to recede into the distance like a ship sailing into a fog. The boy who knew the warmth of a family hearth is now a ghost, a dream that visits you less and less frequently, replaced by the reality of the stone, the cold, and the silence. You realize that the fortress is not just a place where you live, but a force that is actively rewriting the structure of your mind, stripping away the unnecessary decorations of the ego until only the essential architecture remains. You are becoming a shadow, a presence defined not by what you are, but by what you can do and what you can endure. The isolation of the winter is a psychological crucible, a time when the lack of external distraction forces you to confront the vast, empty spaces within your own consciousness. You spend long hours in the library, not always reading, but sometimes simply sitting in the presence of the scrolls, absorbing the weight of the accumulated knowledge that surrounds you. You memorize long passages of poetry in tongues you are only beginning to master, the words tasting like copper and honey on your tongue, their rhythms matching the slow tectonic pulse of the mountain. You learn to see the world as a series of interconnected patterns, a great web of cause and effect where a single, silent movement in the heights can cause a landslide in the valley. The monotony of the days becomes a form of prayer, a way of hallowing the passage of time without the need for celebration or recognition. You are a part of a clockwork that has been ticking for centuries, and your role is simply to be a perfect gear, moving in silence and synchronization with the whole. As the weeks stretch into months, the snow rises even higher, blocking the lower windows entirely and plunging the inner halls into a soft, blue twilight that never truly lifts. You lose track of the specific date, knowing the time only by the thickness of the ice in the water basins and the way the stars shift their positions in the narrow strip of sky visible from the observatory. The psychological effect of this prolonged darkness is a deep, quiet introspection, a state of being where the boundaries between the self and the fortress begin to blur. You feel the cold of the stone as if it were your own skin. You hear the groan of the timber beams as if it were the creaking of your own bones. There is no fear in this, only a profound sense of belonging, a realization that you have finally been accepted by the mountain. You are a seed buried deep in the frozen earth, waiting for a spring that seems impossible in the face of such absolute winter. Your thoughts are calm and slow, drifting like the snowflakes outside, settling into the crevices of your mind and filling them with a quiet, unshakable certainty. You find that you no longer desire the world below, the noise of the markets, or the warmth of the sun. You have found a different kind of light in the darkness of the fortress, a light that comes from the clarity of a mind that has nothing left to lose. One evening, as you are returning to your cell after a long session of silent meditation in the great hall, you encounter your mentor standing by a high archway that overlooks the buried main gate. He is wrapped in a cloak of white fur that makes him almost invisible against the frosted stone, his eyes reflecting the pale, ethereal glow of the moon that has finally broken through the clouds. He does not turn to look at you, but his presence is as palpable as the cold. He speaks in a voice that is barely a whisper, a sound like the first crack of ice on a frozen lake, telling you that the deep snow has begun to settle at its base, a sign that the heart of the winter has passed. The transition from the absolute, frozen white of midwinter into the tentative, weeping grey of the early thaw is a process that occurs in heartbeats of melting ice and the long, rhythmic sighs of the mountain shifting its heavy burden. You wake not to the sharp, dry crack of frost, but to a new sound, a soft and persistent percussion that seems to vibrate through the very masonry of your cell. It is the sound of a single drop of water falling from a stone lintel and striking a puddle on the floor below, a rhythmic, liquid heartbeat that signals the beginning of the great unraveling. You lie still, listening to this new music, realizing that the silence of the winter, which had felt as solid as the granite itself, is now being perforated by 1,000 tiny leaks. The air in your cell has lost its brittle, crystalline edge. It is now heavy and damp, smelling of ancient stone and the first faint stirring of the dark earth beneath the snow. You push back your wool blankets, which feel heavier and more humid than they did a week ago, and you stand on the slate floor, finding it not like fire, but like cold silk against your soles. As you step into the corridor, the rime that had sparkled like starlight has begun to weep, turning into long, shimmering streaks of moisture that catch the dim amber light of the oil lamps. The fortress is waking up, not with a shout, but with a slow, drenching thaw that makes every footstep sound softer, more grounded. You walk toward the upper battlements, and as you emerge into the open air, the transformation of the world takes your breath away. The vast, opaque dome of the winter sky has broken, revealing jagged streaks of a deep, watery violet between heavy, slate-grey clouds. The snow, once a pristine and level shroud, is now pockmarked and sagging, pulling away from the stone walls to reveal the dark, wet bone of the mountain beneath. Everywhere there is the sound of water, the trickle of meltwater down the vertical cliffs, the muffled roar of distant avalanches in the high canyons, and the constant, rhythmic dripping from every roof and archway. The paths that were once treacherous slopes of ice are now rivers of thick grey mud and slush, a new kind of challenge for your balance and your patience. You see the first signs of life returning to the heights. A single, hardy mountain crow perched on a wet crenellation, its feathers slicked with rain, its sharp, inquisitive call echoing off the cliffs with a clarity that was impossible in the muffled winter air. Below the fortress, on the sheltered southern slopes, you see the first hints of color breaking through the receding white the dull, mossy green of hardy lichens, and the pale, translucent shoots of alpine grass pushing through the sodden earth. The mountain is exhaling, a long, slow breath that carries with it the promise of motion and the end of your long seclusion. Inside the training courts, the atmosphere has shifted from endurance to preparation. The drills are no longer about merely surviving the cold, but about reclaiming the fluidity and precision of your body. You spend hours in the mud-slicked courtyards, your feet bare despite the chill, practicing the long, lunging strikes and the low, defensive crouches that require absolute muscular control. Your muscles, which had become lean and dense during the winter rationing, now hum with a quiet, coiled energy. The training sessions grow longer, stretching from the first grey light of dawn until the stars appear in the violet dusk, pushing you to the limits of your physical and mental stamina. You are being reforged, the iron of your winter discipline being tempered into the steel of a functional tool. Between the physical exercises, there are long, quiet sessions in the sheltered alcoves of the library or the small, steam-filled chambers of the bathhouse, where the mentors speak to you in hushed tones about the nature of the world you are about to enter. These are not lectures, but quiet transmissions of wisdom, the words falling like the meltwater, steady and persistent. Your mentor sits across from you, his hands hidden in the sleeves of his indigo robe, his gaze as steady as the mountain peaks. He speaks of the necessity of total anonymity, reminding you that to the world, you must be like the water capable of taking any shape, filling any vessel, yet remaining essentially yourself. You practice the subtle shifts in posture that transform you from a humble pilgrim into a weary merchant, or a sharp-eyed mercenary into a silent scholar. You learn to adjust the cadence of your breath so that it matches the person you are portraying, a secret language of the body that speaks louder than words. You study the intricate social hierarchies of the cities in the valley, the specific ways a man of Cairo bows compared to a man of Damascus, the way a soldier holds his spear, the way a priest carries his scrolls. Every gesture is a thread in the disguise you are weaving for yourself, a mental armor that will protect you far better than any shield of iron. The conversations often return to the theme of loyalty, not a blind, emotional devotion, but a cold, intellectual commitment to the balance of the world. You are told that the order does not seek power for itself, but acts as the gardener of history, pruning the branches that grow too wild and protecting the shoots that are too fragile. This perspective requires a detachment that is difficult to master, a shedding of personal desire that you have been practicing since the day you arrived. You are taught that your life is a small thing, a single drop in the great river, and that its only value lies in its contribution to the flow. As the spring deepens, the preparations take on a more tactile, practical quality. You are given your traveling gear, which is as sparse and efficient as everything else in the fortress. You spend an afternoon in the quiet armory, packing a small, waterproof leather satchel with the essentials for a long journey, a small bag of dried fruit and parched grain, a flint and steel, a coil of thin, strong silk rope, and a few medicinal salves prepared by the herbalists. You check and recheck your boots, ensuring the leather is supple and the soles are intact, for your feet will be your primary mode of transport. Your indigo tunic is replaced by a traveling cloak of rough, undyed wool, a garment that looks like 1,000 others on the roads of the Middle East, yet is designed with hidden pockets and reinforced seams. There is a strange, hollow feeling in your chest as you handle these objects, a mixture of anticipation and a lingering, ghostly nostalgia for the safety of the stone. You realize that you are leaving the womb of the mountain, stepping out of the timeless silence and back into the chaotic, noisy stream of human history. To prepare your mind, you spend your final nights in the fortress in total darkness, visualizing the paths down the mountain, the landmarks of the valley, and the faces of the targets you have studied in the scrolls. You practice the art of forgetting yourself, letting the you that lived in the cell dissolve until only the mission remains. On the final evening, the fortress is remarkably still, as if the mountain itself is holding its breath for your departure. The air is thick with the scent of wet earth and the first blossoms of the hardy mountain shrubs, a sweet, intoxicating perfume that feels like a promise. You meet with your small group, 3 other initiates, shadows like yourself in the dim light of the postern gate. There are no grand farewells, no speeches of glory. The elder who has guided you through the winter stands by the door, his hand resting on the iron bolt. He looks at each of you in turn, his eyes reflecting the flickering light of a single torch. He speaks only once, a whisper that seems to carry the weight of all the centuries the order has existed. Be the shadow that the light cannot find. The gate groans open, the sound muffled by the dampness of the wood and the softness of the air. You step out into the pre-dawn gloom, the sky a deep, bruised charcoal tinged with the faintest silver on the eastern horizon. The group moves in a single, silent file, descending the narrow, winding path that clings to the side of the cliff. The mud is thick and cool beneath your boots, and the sound of the melting snow is a constant rushing background to your movements. You look back once, seeing the fortress silhouetted against the stars, a dark, immovable crown on the head of the mountain. It looks like a dream you are waking from, a place of stone and shadow that has shaped you into something you do not yet fully understand. The descent is slow and methodical, your body responding to the terrain with the fluid grace you have spent years perfecting. You hear the distant, waking calls of birds in the lower forests, the rustle of small animals in the undergrowth, and the steady, rhythmic beat of your own heart. The air grows warmer as you lose altitude, the sharp bite of the summit replaced by the soft, humid breath of the valley. You are moving toward a world of color, noise, and complexity, a world where your anonymity will be your greatest strength and your silence your most lethal weapon. The path levels out as you reach the first of the lower ridges. The town you observed in the winter, now visible as a cluster of grey stone and brown thatch in the distance, waking up to the first light of the spring sun. You do not stop to look for long. The mission has begun, and the mountain is already behind you, a silent guardian of the secrets you carry. You and your companions move like ghosts through the burgeoning green, for shadows merging with the waking world, disappearing into the morning mist as the sun finally crests the peaks and bathes the valley in a new, golden light. The long wait of the winter is over, and the time of the shadow has come. The descent from the high peaks is a process of gradual re-immersion into a world of gravity and heat. A slow unwinding of the vertical life you have known for so many years, as the four of you move in a silent, staggered line down the winding mountain trails. The jagged, frost-shattered granite of the summit slowly gives way to the softer, grey-brown limestone of the foothills. The path beneath your boots, once a predictable surface of hard-packed stone and ice, becomes a shifting mosaic of loose shale and damp clay that demands a constant micro-adjustment of your balance. You feel the weight of your small leather satchel shifting rhythmically against your hip, a steady companion to the sound of your own breathing. The air, which had been thin and sterile in the heights, begins to thicken with the scent of damp moss, crushed pine needles, and the ancient, earthy smell of thawing soil. You find that your body, tempered by the winter's austerity, moves with a strange, autonomous efficiency. Your muscles do not protest the descent, but rather settle into a low-frequency hum of activity that you can sustain for hours without conscious thought. The group moves without the need for verbal direction, each of you maintaining a precise distance that allows for both mutual protection and individual anonymity. When the sun reaches its zenith, casting short, sharp shadows across the path, the group naturally seeks the deep shade of a rocky overhang or a grove of wind-twisted cedars. You sit in silence, the only sound the distant, high-pitched whistle of a mountain hawk and the rhythmic scuttle of a lizard across the sun-warmed stone. You consume a handful of parched grain and a single dried apricot, the flavor intense and startling against the backdrop of your long-term sensory deprivation. There is no conversation, only the shared presence of four shadows waiting for the light to soften. As the days bleed into one another, the mountain trails eventually broaden into dusty, unpaved roads that cut through the lower valleys, winding through landscapes that seem to have been forgotten by time. You pass through abandoned ruins of ancient watchtowers, their stones tumbled and overgrown with thorny vines, where the wind moans through empty archways like a ghostly flute. You sleep outdoors under a canopy of stars that feel closer and more vivid than they ever did from the valley floor. Your body wrapped in your undyed wool cloak, your head resting on the firm earth. The ground is a hard bed, but it is a familiar one, and you find that the sounds of the night, the insistent chirping of crickets, the rustle of dry grass, the distant, mournful lowing of a stray cowbee, come a soothing tapestry that lulls you into a deep, dreamless sleep. You wake at the first grey hint of dawn, when the world is still a series of soft, charcoal outlines, and begin the day's walk before the rest of the world has stirred. This is your preferred time of movement, the liminal space where the boundaries of the self and the environment are most blurred. You encounter other travelers on these roads, caravans of camels laden with salt and silk, their bells clinking with a rhythmic, hypnotic monotony, and groups of weary pilgrims with dust-caked faces and hollow eyes. You do not avoid them with obvious haste, which would draw suspicion. Instead, you move past them with the quiet, unremarkable gait of a poor student or a wandering laborer, your hood pulled forward to shadow your features, You have learned the art of becoming part of the landscape, a figure so mundane that the eye of the observer instinctively moves past you in search of something more interesting. You see the world of men as if through a thick sheet of glass, observing the farmers in their fields tilling the dark, heavy soil, the women at the wells laughing and gossiping, and the children playing in the dust of the village squares. You feel a profound emotional detachment from these scenes, a sense that you are watching a play in a language you no longer speak. Your training has severed the emotional tethers that bind most men to the world. You have no home to return to, no family to miss, no personal ambition to fulfill. You are a vessel of the Order's will, a silent witness to the unfolding of a history in which you play a hidden, vital part. The monotony of the journey is not a burden, but a deepening of your meditation. The repetitive act of walking mile after mile, day after day, becomes a way of stripping away the last remnants of the individual ego. Your thoughts are slow and rhythmic, matching the pace of your footsteps. You find yourself focusing on the smallest details, the way the dust settles in the creases of your companions' cloaks, the specific pattern of light as it filters through the leaves of a plane tree, the metallic taste of the water from a roadside spring. These sensory inputs are recorded with a cold, analytical precision, added to the vast mental library you have built during the winter. The weather begins to shift as you move further south and lower in elevation. The cool, damp air of the spring thaw is replaced by a dry, persistent heat that makes the horizon shimmer and dance. The dust of the road rises in fine, choking clouds, coating your skin and your clothes in a uniform layer of pale brown. Your fatigue is not a sharp pain, but a heavy, dull ache that sits in the small of your back and the soles of your feet, a constant reminder of the physical reality of your mission. You accept this fatigue as you accepted the cold of the mountain, a necessary condition of your existence. You find shelter where you can in the corner of a sun-bleached caravanserai, beneath the cooling arches of a Roman aqueduct, or in the hollowed-out remains of a shepherd's hut. In these quiet moments, you tend to your gear with the same meticulous care you practiced in the armory. You sharpen your concealed blade with a small, smooth stone, the shishi of the steel providing a familiar, grounding rhythm. You check the seams of your boots, reinforcing a loose stitch with a bone needle and a length of waxed thread. You are a self-contained unit, a closed system that requires nothing from the outside world but the barest necessities of water and shade. The lack of conversation within the group is not a sign of hostility, but of a shared understanding of the value of silence. You know the strengths and weaknesses of your companions through the way they move, the way they breathe, and the way they scan the horizon. You are a pack of wolves moving through a world of sheep, silent and purposeful. As you cross into the wider plains, the landscape opens up into a vast, rolling sea of golden grass and scattered olive groves. The sky is an immense, unblinking eye of blue, and the heat becomes a physical weight that you must carry. You move mostly at dusk now, when the air begins to cool and the long violet shadows of the hills stretch out across the road. The sound of the wind through the tall grass is like the rushing of a distant sea, a lonely and beautiful sound that fills the empty spaces of your mind. You reflect on the nature of your purpose, the realization that you are moving toward a point where your training will finally meet the reality of the world. There is no anxiety in this reflection, only a quiet, stoic curiosity. You have been shaped by the stone and the ice to be an instrument of the hidden will, and you are ready for the moment of impact. The journey is a bridge between the eternal silence of the mountain and the temporary noise of the world. and you are traversing it with the patience of the peaks themselves. You pass through regions where the scars of past wars are still visible, charred timbers of burned villages, overgrown mounds that hide the remains of fallen soldiers, and the hollow shells of fortresses that were not built as well as your own. These ruins are reminders of the transience of human empires, of the cycle of growth and decay that the Order seeks to moderate. You see yourself as the gardener who works in the dark, ensuring that the roots of the world remain strong even as the branches are pruned. The physical world begins to change again as you approach the fertile river valleys. The dust of the road is replaced by the smell of irrigation ditches, the verdant scent of growing crops, and the humid, heavy air of the lowlands. The signs of human activity become more frequent, more travelers, more villagers, more noise. The silence of the group becomes a shield, a barrier that keeps the world at bay. You find that you are more alert now, your senses sharpened by the proximity of so many people. You observe the guards at the bridge crossings, the way they lean on their spears and gossip, their eyes lazy and unfocused. You see the merchants in the marketplaces, their movements frantic and driven by greed. You are among them, but you are not of them. You are a shadow in the midday sun, a whisper in the heart of the crowd. The journey has lasted for weeks, a long and rhythmic progression through the seasons of the earth and the seasons of your own spirit. You have walked until the mountain is a distant blue memory on the northern horizon, a ghost that haunts the edge of your vision. You have walked until your boots are an extension of your feet and your cloak is an extension of your skin. And then, one evening, as the sun is setting in a riot of orange and crimson behind a range of low, purple hills, you reach the crest of a final ridge. The plain below is vast and golden in the dying light, and there, rising out of the haze of the horizon, you see the distant, sprawling silhouette of a great city. Its minarets and domes catch the final rays of the sun, glowing like embers in a bed of ash. The sight is both beautiful and terrifying, a hive of human activity and complexity that represents everything you have been trained to navigate. The transition from the vast, open silence of the plains to the encroaching density of the city's perimeter is a gradual thickening of the air and a sensory assault that begins long before you reach the massive sun-baked gates. As you approach the city of Isfahan, the golden light of late afternoon catches the dust kicked up by thousands of feet. Hooves and wheels, creating a shimmering, translucent veil that hangs over the landscape like the breath of a living beast. You feel the silence of the mountain that deep. Interior stillness you spent years cultivating begin to compress within you, forming a hard, diamond core of awareness that must now survive in a sea of cacophony. The gatehouse is a monument of weathered sandstone and iron, its archway yawning like a great mouth that swallows the road, and as you step into its shadow, the temperature drops for a fleeting moment before you are thrust into the vibrant, chaotic heart of the city. The noise is immediate and overwhelming, a tidal wave of sound that has no rhythm or pattern. The rhythmic, metallic clanging of coppersmiths in the nearby bazaar, the guttural shouts of camel drivers maneuvering their surly beasts through the throng, the frantic bleating of goats, and the persistent, melodic cries of water sellers clinking their brass cups. You move with your group, yet you are already alone, practicing the art of the invisible wanderer. Your body, which had become accustomed to the solitary trails and the sparse mountain air, now feels the constant, jarring friction of humanity, the brush of a silk-clad shoulder, the accidental shove of a laborer carrying a crate of leeks, the heat of hundreds of bodies pressed into narrow arteries of stone. You do not recoil. You allow your body to become like a river reed, bending and swaying with the current of the crowd, absorbing the momentum of the city without resisting it. The smells are a thick, complex tapestry that replaces the clean scent of snow and cedar, the pungent aroma of roasted lamb and hot, yeasty flatbreads, the sharp tang of horse sweat and open sewers, the cloying sweetness of overripe melons, and the heavy, intoxicating perfume of frankincense burning in the niches of the mosques. You navigate the labyrinthine streets, where the buildings lean inward as if whispering secrets to one another, their upper stories casting long, jagged shadows that never see the sun. The sky is reduced to a narrow ribbon of brilliant blue far above the dust, a reminder of the world you left behind. You find a modest khan in a district of weavers, a place of crumbling brick and worn timber, where the constant thrum-clack of looms provides a hypnotic background noise. You rent a small, shadowed room on the upper floor. Its only furniture a thin mat of woven reeds and a low wooden table scarred by the knives of 100 previous travelers. There is a single window, a narrow aperture covered by a lattice of carved cedar, which overlooks a busy intersection where 3 alleys meet. This becomes your observatory, your mountain peak within the city. You spend the first several days in absolute stillness, sitting in the corner of the room where the shadows are deepest, watching the world through the wooden screen. Your task is to map the rhythm of the city, to understand its pulse before you ever attempt to influence it. You watch a specific spice merchant who sets up his stall at dawn, noting the exact way he arranges his jars of saffron and sumac, the nervous tick of his left hand when he argues over price, and the precise moment he closes his eyes to catch the mid-morning sun. You observe a captain of the guard who passes through the intersection every afternoon at the call to prayer, his armor clinking with a dull, heavy sound that tells you his sword is poorly maintained. You memorize the faces of the beggars who occupy the corners, realizing that they, too, are observers. Their low status a mask for a keen and hungry intelligence. You are not looking for an opening for violence. You are looking for the patterns of life, the predictable loops of habit that govern all men. This surveillance is a continuation of your mountain training, a slow and patient gathering of data that requires the total suppression of your own ego. You feel no kinship with the people below, no shared humanity with the child playing with a hoop in the gutter, or the elderly woman hanging laundry on a balcony. They are the subjects of a vast, intricate experiment, and you are the silent recorder. When you must leave the room to gather water or food, you practice the art of blending so perfectly into the mundane that you disappear. You wear the drab, dust-colored garments of a common clerk or a traveler of no consequence. Your movements deliberate, yet unremarkable. You learn to walk without the coiled tension of the warrior, letting your gaze wander with a feigned, lazy curiosity while your mind records every exit, every hidden courtyard, and the specific angle of the rooftops. The city is a three-dimensional puzzle of verticality and depth, and you begin to see it as a series of interconnected routes, a staircase that leads to a flat roof, a narrow gap between 2 granaries, a drainage tunnel that empties into the river. You find that the rooftops are a second city, a world of interconnected terraces where the air is thinner and the noise is a muffled hum. Here, among the drying laundry and the prowling cats, you can move with more freedom, looking down upon the teeming streets like a god of the heights. You spend hours lying flat on the sun-warmed tiles of a mosque's dome, watching the flow of the city from above, tracing the movements of the elite as they are carried in palanquins through the crowds. You learn the schedules of the gatekeepers, the rotation of the night watch, and the specific patterns of the lamps as they are lit one by one across the cityscape. The monotony of this surveillance is its own form of discipline, a testing of your patience that rivals the winter isolation. There is a psychological weight to being so close to thousands of lives, yet remaining entirely separate from them. A ghost haunting a living world. You find peace in this detachment, a sense of clarity that comes from having no stake in the city's dramas. The anger of a cheated customer, the joy of a wedding procession, the grief of a funeral, of these are merely data points, flickers of emotion in a system you are learning to navigate with clinical precision. Your identity has become so thin that you sometimes feel you are nothing more than a pair of eyes and a memory, a vessel for the order's requirements. At night, the city changes its character. The vibrant chaos of the day giving way to a heavy, apprehensive quiet punctuated by the distant barking of dogs and the rhythmic call of the night watchman. You sit in your room, the only light, the faint silver of the moon filtering through the lattice, and you review your mental maps. You can now close your eyes and walk every alley within 5 blocks of the Khan, knowing exactly where the stone is loose, where the shadow is deepest, and where the smell of the tanneries begins. Your gear sits in the corner, cleaned and ready, but it remains untouched. The blade is a last resort. The mind is the primary tool. You find yourself reflecting on the difference between the stillness of the mountain and the stillness of the city. In the mountain, the silence was a vacuum. Here, it is a held breath, a suspension of activity that feels precarious and fragile. You are the one who waits within that suspension, the silent element that does not belong to the city's past or its future. The time passes in a slow, rhythmic progression of light and shadow, and you feel the spring heat beginning to bake the brick walls of your room, the scent of the city's dust settling in your throat. You are waiting for a signal, a word, or a change in the pattern that you have so meticulously mapped. Until then, you are a part of the masonry, a shadow in the corner of the room, a ghost watching from the window. The city continues to pulse and breathe around you, unaware that its most dangerous inhabitant is also its most observant and its most still. You have become the master of this small, square universe of wood and stone. And as the night deepens and the last of the street noise fades into a low, distant murmur, you remain awake, your eyes open in the dark, watching the intersection where the 3 alleys meet, waiting for the one movement that does not fit the pattern, the one ripple in the water that will signal the start of the next phase of your existence. The air is still, the city sleeps, and you are the silence that remains, a sentinel of the hidden order in the heart of the world of men. You sink into the quiet of the room, your body relaxed, but your mind a steady flame, a witness to the night and the secrets it holds. The journey from the mountain has brought you to this point of absolute focus, where the scale of your life has narrowed down to the observation of a single street, and you find that this, too, is a form of peace, a quietude of purpose that sustains you in the long, dark hours before the dawn. The city is a labyrinth, but you are the thread that runs through it, silent and unseen, a part of the hidden history that is even now preparing to turn its next page in the light of the coming day. You wait, and in the waiting, you find the strength of the mountain once again, a core of unyielding granite in a world of shifting sand. The city of Isfahan breathes in its sleep, and you are its silent pulse, a watcher in the shadows of the weaver's district, ready for whatever the morning may bring to the narrow, dusty streets below. The days in the weaver's district begin to bleed into one. another until the very concept of a week or a month dissolves into a singular, rhythmic pulse of light and shadow, a long and slow undulation of time that mirrors the breathing of the city itself. You sit by the lattice window in the same corner of the room where the wood is worn smooth by your presence, and you realize that the anticipation you once felt, the quiet hum of expectation that followed you down from the mountain, has finally evaporated, leaving behind a state of being that is as clear and as cold as a high-altitude spring. The surveillance you conduct is no longer a task to be completed, but a way of existing in the world. You have become the silent eye that records the passage of the merchant, the soldier, and the beggar without ever needing to interfere with their trajectories. You watch the sun crawl across the cracked plaster of the opposite wall, marking the hours with a slow, golden finger. And you find that you can exist in the spaces between those hours without the slightest flicker of restlessness. Your training has reached its true fruition, not in the sharpening of a blade, but in the sharpening of your patience until it has become a form of absolute stillness. You reflect on the nature of the life you have chosen, or that was chosen for you, and you understand now that the popular tales of the order, the dramatic leaps from parapets, the sudden glint of steel in a crowded square are merely the surface ripples on a deep and motionless sea. The true life of the assassin is this: the endless waiting, the total immersion in the mundane, the long and quiet study of a target's morning prayer or their preference for a specific type of tea. You are a scholar of the ordinary, a witness to the small, repetitive loops of human behavior that ultimately weave the fabric of history. You realize that to strike a blow is a moment's work, but to understand why and when that blow must fall is the work of a lifetime. This realization brings with it a profound sense of peace, a shedding of the urgency that defines the lives of the people in the street below. They are driven by the need to arrive, to acquire, to be seen. You are driven by the need to remain, to observe, and to be forgotten. The loss of your personal identity, which once felt like a slow erosion during the mountain winter, is now complete. You can no longer recall the sound of your own voice as it was before the fortress, and the memories of your childhood home have become like the illustrations in an old, dusty book, beautiful, perhaps, but belonging to someone else. You do not mourn this loss, for you have gained something much more enduring. You have become a part of the mountain's silence, a piece of the eternal shadow that exists behind the glare of the world's events. You are a ghost inhabiting a room in a con, a nameless traveler whose presence leaves no more mark on the city than the smoke from a baker's oven. This anonymity is not a cage, but a vast and open sky. By being no one, you are free to be anywhere, to see everything, and to move through the world like the wind through the tall grass. You find yourself thinking about time, not as a limited resource to be spent, but as a medium in which you reside. In the city, time is a frantic thing, measured by the closing of markets and the payment of debts. But for you, time is the slow turning of the constellations and the gradual wearing away of stone by water. You have learned to wait for the world to reveal its secrets to you, understanding that truth is not something to be hunted, but something that emerges when the observer is sufficiently still. You sit in the deepening twilight of the room, listening to the muffled clack-thrum of the looms from the floors below, a sound that has become the heartbeat of your existence. You watch the dust motes dancing in a single, dying ray of sunlight, and you see in their chaotic movement the same patterns that govern the rise and fall of empires. You are a silent witness to history, a person who stands in the periphery of great events, ensuring that the balance is maintained without ever seeking the spotlight. There is a quiet majesty in this role, a dignity that comes from being the hidden foundation upon which the visible world is built. You accept your solitude not as a burden, but as a sacred space, a sanctuary where the noise of the ego cannot penetrate. The city outside begins its evening transition, the shouting of the merchants subsiding into a low, collective murmur, the smell of wood smoke rising to meet the cooling air. You hear the call to prayer echoing from the minarets, a haunting, melodic sound that ripples across the rooftops like a stone dropped into a pond. You do not move. You do not light a lamp. You remain in your corner, a part of the growing shadows. Your breathing so slow and shallow that it would be invisible to anyone but a brother of the order. You feel a deep, emotional stillness settling over you, a calm that is as profound as the deepest layers of the mountain rock. The world of men, with its passions and its fears, its wars and its celebrations, feels very far away, even though it is just beyond your window. You are the observer, the one who stays when all others have fled, the one who remembers when all others have forgotten. You think of the mountain fortress, the snowbound courtyards, and the mentors who taught you the value of the void, and you realize that you have carried that fortress with you into the heart of the city. You are never truly away from the silence, for the silence is what you have become. The night deepens, and the city of Isfahan surrenders to the dark, the lights in the windows blinking out one by one until only the moon and the stars remain to watch over the streets. You listen to the distant, rhythmic footsteps of the night watch, the occasional bark of a dog, and the soft, dry rustle of the wind through the palm trees in a nearby garden. These sounds do not disturb your peace. They are merely the textures of the night, the subtle variations in the silence that you have learned to love. You find that you have finally reached the end of your striving, the point where the mission and the self are one and the same. You do not know what the morning will bring, nor do you feel the need to know. You are prepared for the call when it comes, and you are equally prepared for a lifetime of continued waiting. You are a sentinel of the hidden order, a quiet soul in a world of noise, a shadow that knows the light but is not defined by it. The air in the room is cool and still, carrying the faint scent of the looms and the ancient dust of the brickwork. You close your eyes, not to sleep, but to see more clearly the internal landscape you have constructed, a place of perfect symmetry and unshakable calm. The city breathes, the world turns, and you remain, a silent witness to the beauty and the tragedy of the human story, forever detached and forever present. You are fully transformed now, a vessel of the Order's ancient wisdom, a quiet observer of the world who has found the ultimate freedom in the act of being nothing. The silence of the mountain is here, in this small room in the Weaver's district, and it is enough. You let the sounds of the night wash over you, a gentle tide that pulls you further into the depths of your own stillness, and you find that there is no more need for words, no more need for action, and no more need for a name. You are the shadow, you are the stone, and you are at peace. The long journey from the heights has brought you to this moment of absolute quietude, where the only reality is the breath in your lungs and the steady, patient rhythm of your heart. You sit in the dark, a part of the night itself, watching the world sleep, and you are content to be the one who stays awake to watch over its dreams. The night is vast and beautiful, and the silence is a gift that you receive with open hands. In the heart of the city, in the heart of the world, you have found the center of the universe, and it is as still and as silent as the stars above the mountain. You sink into the final, deepest layer of your meditation, a state of being where the self is forgotten and only the observation remains. A quiet soul drifting in the eternal dark of the hidden history. The city is quiet now. The looms have stopped their clatter, and the wind has died down to a whisper. You are the stillness at the center of the storm, the ghost in the machine, the silent partner in the dance of time. And as the night continues its slow and majestic progress toward a dawn that is still many hours away, you find that you are exactly where you are meant to be, a part of the great unfolding mystery that is the world. You are the shadow that remains, and you are finally truly home.